Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment in our Reviewed and Ranked series. Today we have an awesome character that I am super excited to go over, as I've been wanting to have this character at max level for quite some time to fully break down what they're capable of. And of course, that brings us to the star of the show, Psylocke. Now, before we get into the breakdown and analysis of this character, here's your obligatory reminder to check and see if you are subscribed to the channel. If you are not, please fix that for me. We are very close to the sub goal of 750, at which point I will get a Twitter where you can interact with me. Hopefully we can get there before the end of the week, but we'll find out. Also, if you find today's video helpful and or enjoyable, make sure you hit that like button, and that lets me know that you are enjoying this type of series and content for Ultimate Alliance 3. So just like we always do, we need to start by looking at the team build synergies that Psylocke brings to the table, and she actually has 6 synergies that are quite useful. She has a Mastery synergy with Femme Fatales, she has a Vitality synergy with X-Force, an Energy synergy with Women of Marvel, and 3 Strength synergies with X-Men, Martial Artists, and Cutting Edge. So if you're looking to bolster your team's damage output, Psylocke is an excellent choice, especially when you take into consideration that you can pair her with Nightcrawler at the exact same time in an initial playthrough, and you're immediately going to get that cutting edge strength boost to your team. It's kind of a no-brainer in terms of adding her to your roster and making sure that you can fully benefit from having quick versatility with Nightcrawler, who we looked at last week, and additional strong hits with what Psylocke has to offer. And she also comes unlocked initially at level 20, so she has access to all of her abilities right off the bat. Psylocke's basic attack sequence has 5 different hits to it, and it does decently well. It's not the most impressive of combos, especially where we've seen characters like Black Panther who have up to 7 or 8 hits in their combo, depending on how you choose to swing that. But it's a lot better than a lot of other characters that we've looked at, and has that, in my opinion, high benefit of being able to stagger out the grunt type characters that you encounter when fighting, as laying your attacks into them will prevent them from retaliating. Of course, that doesn't apply to the mighty and boss enemies, but she has other tools to help her deal with that pretty easily. Psylocke's heavy attack involves her extending that psionic beam sword out in front of her. She slams it onto the ground directly in front, and it does provide knockdown and knockback for the smaller grunt type characters, and will supply a decent amount of damage to the opponents as well. And it hits a lot further out in front of her than her other basic attack combos will do, and kind of has an area effect outside of that area, kind of a slam type damage area or a knockback, but of course the majority of the damage you're going to get out of that is right where the beam falls. But certainly a powerful heavy attack that can be used every now and again when absolutely needed, or if you're just out of reach of an opponent that you're trying to finish off. Psylocke does possess a double jump along with most of the cast, and she does do a mid-air flip, as is pretty common with those who have a double jump to take advantage of. So it does help her get around some of the floor puzzles and traps that take place and allow her to traverse some land a little bit easier. But it does not have as many applications as some of the other tools, such as flight or teleportation, like we've seen with other members of the cast up to this point. Psylocke's falling aerial is a spinning slash with both her katana and that psionic beam sword that she has, and it primarily hits out in front of her as she falls back down to the ground, as she does kind of some somersaults heading downwards in that direction. But it is a very useful falling aerial, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about one of her abilities in specific. Mainly because it allows her to extend a lot of the damage output that she can do with one of the abilities that you should find yourself using with increased frequency. And as we round out the standard abilities, we of course come to the block and dodge animation, where Psylocke will kind of cross her katana in front of her in a defensive stance. Again, this doesn't provide any incoming damage if opponents hit into her block, though that would be a really cool mechanic if it were the case. And if she dodges out of the way of an incoming attack, she kind of dashes forward instead of performing a somersault like we see is more typical of characters her size. You typically see some of the larger characters kind of lumbering or lunging forward in the way that she does, but it works for her, so you can't knock it too hard. Let's get into Psylocke's unique abilities now, starting off with the Psychic Knife. This attack is going to be your go-to for busting down opponents with high stagger bars, as it has a B classification to damage, which is pretty good, an A classification to the stagger damage dealt, and maintains a very respectable C classification to the energy points used to use this ability. As she lunges forward, she will dash a little bit closer to the area of impact in the opponents that she's looking at. You can charge up this attack and influence the direction where you let it out, which certainly helps it in terms of the overall power that you can output when using this particular ability. Though it is important to note that when used within a team synergy, she will unleash that attack in the direction that she is facing. So if you are controlling Psylocke at the time that you decide to synergize this attack, just make sure that you are facing in a direction where you're going to get the maximum yield out of the damage that will ensue from that ability. This attack does have the energy attack type and the charge synergy trait, and consistent with all of Psylocke's abilities, it benefits from a reduced energy point cost, an increase to attack damage and stagger damage dealt, as well as a reduced chance of being interrupted as the attack is ranked up. Psylocke's secondary ability is the Katana Slash, and this involves a Psychic Knife uppercut while she rises up into the air, and this does put her in a position where she can cancel out of that ability, or as she falls back down to the ground, you can input on the attack button to chain a falling aerial on this attack, further increasing the damage output that can be done, which is always a phenomenal thing to see, and it actually seems to be fairly rare among the cast as we're looking through these characters, as very few have actually had the ability to chain a falling aerial out of one of their abilities. And Psylocke very specifically benefits from this, because not only is the Katana Slash insanely powerful with a damage classification of A and maintaining a respectable C classification to stagger damage, it's always phenomenal when you can extend the damage that you are dealing off of this type of an attack with a falling aerial or other chain. You will often find yourself rinsing and repeating this Katana Slash attack, especially against mini-boss characters when they have become vulnerable, or if you need to fully stun them after they've become staggered by depleting that bar. This attack has the energy attack type and the launch synergy trait, in addition to those wonderful stats that we've seen with the A and C classifications to damage, stagger, and energy point consumption, respectively. Moving on to the third ability, we have the Psionic Shuriken, and don't let this attack fool you, because it certainly can be abused in the realm of taking down swaths of opponents, especially of the grunt sort. You can launch a volley of explosive psionic knives, and Psylocke will propel herself backwards to create some distance from those opponents. So if you are needing a retreat type option and want to ensure that you are keeping up on the damage that you are outputting, you can switch over to this ability, and you can even spam this, as every time she lands she can throw another round of those shurikens, though you'll never see more than 6 of them on the ground at a time, as she throws out 3 every time she jumps back, and after a short interval they will explode with some concussive force and deal a respectable amount of damage as well. This also has the energy attack type with that explosive synergy trait, and has a B classification to damage, a C classification to stagger damage, and maintaining that C classification to energy points consumed. Psylocke's final ability is the Psionic Blast, and this is kind of the lackluster ability of her kit, though it is still a decent option if you absolutely need to use this in a pinch. This is where Psylocke will gather some psychic energy and then attack in a 360-degree area. More immediate to the character, I feel like the Cosmic Burst and other attacks of this caliber that we've seen out of Captain Marvel and a few others have more range to them, but it's not the worst ability in the game by far, and all of Psylocke's abilities are quite practical and powerful when used in the correct environments. This attack also has that energy attack type with a burst synergy trait and maintains C classifications to the damage, stagger damage, and energy points consumed when using this particular ability. Though I would steer you to any of the previous 3 abilities wherever and whenever possible. You may find that there are instances, especially if you're needing to create a little bit of distance around yourself, that the Psionic Blast will work a bit better. However, I do feel like the Psionic Shuriken is better in terms of overall damage that you can output against crowds of enemies, especially when you're getting surrounded, as you can distance yourself and deal larger amounts of damage in a wider area than what the Psionic Blast is capable of. And finally, we are at the extreme attack for Psylocke, and this is an incredibly quick and insanely powerful move. Psylocke will extend out that psionic blade, and she will tuck it out behind her and then do about 720 degrees or 2 full spins and take a few steps forward where she's standing to increase the reach of this attack. And boy howdy, does it hit a lot of enemies, and does it hit them hard. You also don't really need to worry about this move expiring before the opponents are able to recover if they've been stunned or staggered out, because it has a 3.5 second duration. It's over very, very quick and hits on all sides of the character in much more range than she's capable of doing with any of her other attacks. I would recommend trying to be closer to the opponent or the target at hand, though as I mentioned, she does kind of move forward as she spins and uses that attack. So it's not the end of the world if you're not exactly where you want her to be. Just make sure she isn't on the opposite side of the map, especially if you're trying to use her to attack into mini-boss characters or boss-type characters to layer in hefty amounts of damage. But as she is a standard damage dealer, you really shouldn't be in a circumstance where she's off fighting on her own, as she's a character that you'll probably want to rely on more often than most with the amount of damage and power that she wields. So now that we have broken down everything that Psylocke has to offer, it is time for us to determine where she belongs on our tier list. And I think it's fairly obvious, based off of the praises that I've been singing throughout this entire analysis, that she is incredibly powerful. So we're not even going to consider the lower tiers of this list for Psylocke at all. She also has the benefit of having abilities that actually allow her to deal damage, and with the reach and scope of the attacks that she has and what she is able to unleash, she belongs, in my opinion, very highly ranked. So I am going to place her in S tier, just ahead of Black Panther. Now, I do believe that I will eventually have characters that outrank her in this area, but there's not a whole lot of stiff competition comparatively in terms of what she is capable of compared with characters in these lower tiers from a sheer damage output characteristic. And she also benefits from being able to access her entire kit as a new unlock as well. But what do you think? Do you think that I've oversold Psylocke, undersold her? Be sure to let me know what your thoughts and opinions are down below, and we will see you tomorrow with another brand new video, and next week with a new installment in our Ranked and Reviewed series. But until then, thanks again for watching, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.